The symbolism of firefighter is that rough and ready, all sooty, smelly, sweaty, and that's the image.
But it's that same mentality, it's that same capability that with a silent killer can get you in a lot of trouble.
It's something that I don't think any of us ever foresaw what could happen.
Firefighters have a cancer rate that's much higher than the general population.
You knew the smoke was bad, you knew there was stuff in the smoke, but now you look at all the firefighters around the country that are suffering with this illness.
I can show them a picture of a fire. I can make them go in a room that's on fire and they feel the heat. They feel the effect of that. Cancer kind of is unseen until all of a sudden it pops up in a way you don't want it to pop up with some sort of medical issues.
I've always thought that a full understanding of the nature of the problem is one way to get people to understand. And you do that by understanding victims.
I was in the fire service 30 years, served 10 years as fire chief in Miami-Dade County, served as U.S. fire administrator. But at a very young age, I found out that I had cancer. And I had to have surgery, and luckily I caught it early enough where everything is fine. But I never, in my wildest imagination, thought it had anything to do with the job and the chemicals we were exposed to.
In October of 2012, I was diagnosed with cancer. I went through surgery in December of 2012, and I have been monitored every 90 days since that time.
It's the same thing as a line of duty death. It's not going to happen here. It's not going to happen to me. It's not going to happen to my family. Myself, as a cancer survivor, I didn't think it was going to happen to me, and it happened.
So just under 3 years ago, I was diagnosed with a very aggressive and rare form of thyroid cancer. The type of cancer that I had was generally seen in 75-year-old men. So here I was, a 50-year-old woman being diagnosed with this type of cancer. I suspected that it was related to my 23 years in the fire service.
I don't think I've ever experienced anything like sitting across from a doctor who tells you you have cancer. And then you go back with that doctor and you sit there and talk about what you can do about it. And none of your choices are particularly good.
Everybody else in the firehouse, they were afraid for me. They were afraid for me. It was just, like I said, the kitchen table is a great place. So when you lose one person that has a voice on that kitchen table, it slows everybody down.
I found out that I had 4 major brain tumors and spots all over my brain. I never thought I'd get you here. My doctor said that. He said, you had maybe a 10% chance of being here. And I told him, well, I appreciate that. I just feel sorry for the other 90% because I wasn't going anywhere. At the time, I had a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old.
One particular guy I'm really close to, and I know what he loves. I know what his passions are. You know, I've seen this kid since I've been on. He was on an ambulance when I met him, and he's a lieutenant now. And I've seen him fight this thing, and thought he had a beat, and it came back, and he's.
As you decide what's best for you, or you decide what's best for your family, and you're not wearing any turnouts or a hood or a mask or a helmet in that conversation. You're just a human being sitting across from a doctor who's telling you that probably because of what you did for a living, that you've got a problem.
Well, the key to cancer in the fire service is that it does not discriminate.
Unlike people, and I'm not trying to be funny here, but it doesn't stereotype. You know, it does lump us together, but it lumps us together based on what we do.
Regardless of where you work, regardless of who you are, you're at risk. There are firefighters who face dangers of grain bins and silo fires and tractor overturns. There's firefighters who face dangers in high-rise fires and below-grade fires. And every area of the country has what would be called a parochial or a local nature for risk. It's just how risk is. It changes from region to region, but not with cancer.
You know, you go from the East Coast to the West Coast, the stories are the same. I mean, they're absolutely heart-wrenching battles that our firefighters are having to face, and it's not on the fire ground, it's in the hospital. It's going to chemo and radiation treatments. And those are the battles that we're fighting right now, and unfortunately, we're losing a whole bunch of them.
I remember the oncologist saying that, you know, she's like, this is such an odd type of cancer for you to have at the time I was 32 years old when I was diagnosed. And she's like, a 32-year-old, you know, healthy male doesn't get cancer like this. She's like, are you exposed to anything? You know, she's like, we see this type of cancer in, you know, 50, 60-year-olds that worked in you know, industrial type atmospheres for years and years and years. And I was like, well, no, I'm a firefighter. And she's like, you know, that's where this is coming from.
No matter who you are, no matter where you are, no matter what type of a firefighter you are, then you are subjected to cancer-causing agents.
It has nothing to do with what size fire department you're with, even so much the frequency of the emergency calls that you're on, because it only takes one.
We don't know what that one time is. Is it particulate from diesel exhaust? Is it that one fire that emits, or the smoke that emits from that single car fire that you went in a month? We truly don't know. And that's why you can never leave your guard down. That's why every single day has to be step-by-step procedure to protect us to the highest level.
And what you're exposed to at those scenes are known carcinogens that enter your body in various ways and absolutely cause you some serious problems in your life.
With cancer, the risk is consistent whether you're in Des Moines or Miami, whether you're in San Diego or Bangor, Maine, or New York City, or Collinsville, Oklahoma. The risk is the same, and your awareness level is the one thing that can separate you from those of us who are dealing with cancer and living with it from those of us who aren't.
I got another probably 1,700, 1,800 folks that they're susceptible to the same thing. And it takes a toll on an organization. But we have to continue to learn from these things. And I don't think this is going to be as difficult as people imagine.
When you go into a building, you've got to treat that just like as if you were going to touch the flame and you were going to get burned. If you're going to breathe that smoke, you're going to get cancer. We're taking it more in a serious look. It's not, you know, those guys anymore, it's us.
Recent research is telling us that firefighters' occurrence of cancer is greater than the general public.
Well, when you talk about cancer, there's a lot of different varieties of cancer, obviously, and research studies have shown that firefighters in particular, for certain types of cancer, have in some cases a greater incidence of these cancers than the normal population in the United States.
There's so much research being conducted out there that the science is starting to make the linkages to the byproducts of combustion that were being absorbed into the body, that are being inhaled into the body, and constant repetitive exposures to those toxins are leading to the diagnosis of the cancers. And so I think what the science is going to be able to do is to make that linkage that's needed to say this is a result of that. And when that happens, it's going to change the whole playing field for everybody.
The NIOSH study had two phases. Phase one counted the number of firefighter cancer cases and cancer deaths in the study population and compared this to the U.S. general population. Phase two collected information about firefighters' exposure to fires and then compared firefighters with more exposure to firefighters with less exposure.
The piece that you say about it is to the men and women in the organization who may be self-exposing to the carcinogens, and you have to get them to get the message. The second piece is the political environment in which men and women, leaders in the fire service, are petitioning our government, which is our right, to change legislation to have presumptive laws associated with cancer and heart attacks. And that's, in some states, it's very, very well done. But where I see the challenge. You've got to be able to use the data to make the argument.
We concluded that in phase 1 that firefighters had more cancer cases and more cancer deaths.
I think the research tells us, both from an anecdotal as well as an empirical standpoint, that there are relationships between different types of scenarios and what types of potential carcinogens exist in those scenarios, and then what types of cancers people actually contract. We didn't have that data 20 or 30 years ago.
It's proactive versus reactive. How do we better prevent fires? How do we mitigate against the losses when fires occurs? How do we prevent death and injury to firefighters? And so it's at that very top of my list that we do things that are available to us to do to protect the health and safety of firefighters.
As we talk about the gap of how did the firefighter get the cancer and did it come from being a firefighter or other activities, always gives an opportunity for people to question the cancer cause. I think that the need is for more evidence-based research, and I think some of that is going to come out of the studies from the post 9/11 deaths that are occurring.
I got cancer as a result of the Trade Center. I was sent up there on September 12th as part of the fire administration to give some help to the New York City Fire Department. I had to go home and have a conversation with my wife about, look, this happened in my career in Jersey City. You know some of these people who died. Well, it looks like it's my turn.
Right now in New York City, we've recognized 126 firefighters and EMS workers that have died, not counting the police officers, the Port Authority workers, the steel workers, and everybody else that helped everybody.
Dr. Howard from NIOSH is doing great work in certifying that those people that were on ground zero operating, were exposed that day, have come down with cancers, have it as a result of their presence on 9/11. They're actually issuing certification letters to say these firefighters and these rescue workers got this cancer from this incident. It's all about making the connection of where the injury, illness, or death resulted from.
We have, at headquarters, we have a wall of names of firefighters that died post 9/11. And it's a separate spot of honor for them. They died doing the battle just like anybody else died of line of duty death.
If you're ever tempted to do or not to do something that might expose you or make it more serious exposure to carcinogens, think about how you're going to sit down with your kids and say, Dad's not going to be here or Mom's not going to be here in about 2 months.
I think the focus is just starting to get there. I mean, look how long it took the research to identify that, yes, the asbestos and the chemicals and the hazards that were at the World Trade Center were actually the cause of all these people dying and that worked there on that pile, that worked and breathed in all of that. So just the fact that it takes so long for the research to catch up to it so that we can be preventive rather than reactive. I think that alarms me the most.
Hey, watch that light!
What has happened over the last several decades is the materials that we put in our homes have changed significantly. If you look in the 50s and 60s, our furniture was mostly cotton-based. And now everything has oil-based stuff in it. It's all polyester. It's all stuff that burns very rapidly and puts off some very toxic chemicals. So we have to protect our firefighters differently now in this day and age than we did decades ago.
Materials back in our grandmother's age, you know, there was a home that had, you know, a natural fiber carpet, a woolen carpet, or a cotton carpet. Furnitures were made of very natural fibers. Nowadays, everything has some sort of petroleum product.
We never know what's inside a building, or what's inside a dumpster, or what's inside a car, or what's inside anywhere that we're called to, you know, to remediate and to mitigate that problem.
Some of our everyday activities expose us to the very toxic things that are causing the cancers, and that it isn't just a chemical spill or a PCB fire. It's the everyday toxins that we face when we provide services to our communities.
We grew up where we wore hoods, we wore masks, we wore bunkers, but the dirtier, the more burned up we look, we thought that was what made a good firefighter. That was impressive. So the blacker your gear was, the better.
We cannot have as a badge of honor filthy turnouts and filthy helmets.
Admit I'm the guy that, I liked the salty look. I liked my helmet crunchy looking, or I'd get new gear. My new gear would come in and I'd still wear my old gear because it was a little more beat up, it was a little more comfortable.
We would go to fires, we'd wear our bunker gear all day long. We'd put it on the truck next to us, we would cook in it, eat in it, have it next to our beds.
When I came into the fire service, I came in at that midpoint where self-contained breathing apparatus were, you shouldn't use them. We had them, but you shouldn't use them. To the point where we started to making it mandatory through an operational procedure. Well, during that transition, a lot of firefighters would not wear that equipment because they didn't want to be ostracized or talked about.
I would also, be the guy that as soon as someone took their mask off in a fire scene, I would always pull mine off. I didn't need it. The fire was out.
We've since discovered that the worst time to take your breathing apparatus off is when you knock down the fire. That's when the carcinogens are the absolute worst and at their highest percentages. And I know in my career that as soon as the fire was out, you got rid of that thing.
One of the things that we did back then, I'm finding out now, are things that are killing firefighters.
Sometimes we think we have adequate protective gear. In many cases, we have very good protective gear, but that gear needs to evolve with the hazards. And in one case in particular now, what I've known of lately, if you look at a firefighter's ensemble, everything is pretty well protected with vapor barriers with the exception of the firefighter's hood. And right in the neck areas where you have a lot of exposures through particulate matter and things of that nature that can enter the body, then enter the bloodstream.
There's a very large percentage of volunteers. Volunteers tend to have their gear, their personal protective equipment, traveling with them in their cars. We're really pushing that message that it's not okay to have your dirty gear in your car after you've come out of a fire, washing your gear after every incident.
You see these little things when you see a spot on your arm, when you're coughing and something doesn't feel right, go get it checked. Firefighters tend to be tough people that overlook things like that, and I was one of them, and it dang near killed me.
I think going through chemo and going through what I've gone through is salty enough. I don't need to wear the battle-hardened gear, the whatever. I'll wear the shiny new helmet looking like I'm right out of the magazine. I've learned my lesson there. I'll be the guy that will be on air long after the fire's out and over. I hope this sets an example for the guys around me that, can happen to anybody.
Culture is the #1 issue that we have to address. We have behaved in a fashion for so long a period of time that it's tough to break the routine. So we have to have supervisors, managers, leaders, chiefs that are willing to take it upon themselves to drive that cultural change.
I have never met firefighters that you couldn't train to be better, and they wanted to be better at their jobs. They truly do. But they have to believe in what you're saying. So I think that it's incumbent upon all of us in the fire service to set the example ourselves.
Establish the procedures and enforce the procedures and supervise the personnel so that if they make that lapse of judgment, remind them that they need the PPE, remind them that they need the rehabilitation, remind them that they need to go and clean up, remind them to put the diesel exhaust collection system back onto the exhaust of the apparatus.
The environment that we're putting you into is dangerous, and we're trying to give you the very best equipment out there to protect yourself. You have to take advantage of that.
We look at ourselves as Superman or Superwoman or whatever be the case, but the modern day kryptonite is cancer.
We're not superheroes. The message is that we are vulnerable. The message is that these things are happening to us. They're happening to our brothers and sisters. The message is that there is things that we can do to prevent it.
There's another education level that needs to be done to the mayors, the city managers, the council people, the politicians around this country, that is something that everyone's facing.
As we make statements like, we're our brother's keepers, but we got to back those up with actions, otherwise those are just words. And if you're really your brother's keeper, you won't let him breathe smoke, you won't let him wear dirty gear, you won't let him hang out after a job without showering and washing up, and you're going to be on board with the things we know now that we have to do.
Provide people with the training they need, to provide people with good supervision and good leadership, sometimes even to protect us from ourselves. Those aren't always popular things, but they're the right thing to do. I've seen it over my career with many other issues, and we will continue to make headway with this as well.
I just encourage every fire chief in particular to look around you where you are in your jurisdiction. And just as I have to look around in Washington, D.C. and the federal government and say, yes, there are obstacles, there are barriers, there are hurdles, but take responsibility for what is it that we can do. Focus on those things that we can do that reduce the threat and get it done.
The changes that we're seeing in strategy and tactics as a result of the science versus the war stories, this too, we will make the changes that are necessary. Firefighters are smart people. These are men and women who have gone through tremendous processes to get the job and succeed in the job and get promoted through the job.
What we have to do is change the discussion at the kitchen table, because I believe that to be the best learning environment within the fire service.
Well, the reality is, true courage says you do the right thing regardless of what people are saying. And that's difficult to do sometimes.
If you think about knowledge, and when you have knowledge, the greatest crime you can commit is not share it, not listen to other opinions about it. Knowledge is useless if you don't use it. Now we have knowledge about cancer and carcinogens. Now's the time to use it, and that takes courage.